In the world of fame and legends, there are rare moments when two giants from completely different worlds finally stand face to face. One ruled the boxing ring with speed, confidence, and words that echoed across the globe. The other ruled the stage with a voice that could make thousands scream and a presence that changed music forever. On a warm night in 1970, something unforgettable happened when Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali finally met in person. At the time, Elvis Presley was already known around the world as the king of rock and roll. His concerts were massive events, and his influence stretched far beyond music. But what many people didn't know was that Elvis had a deep fascination with martial arts and combat sports. Behind the glamorous stage lights and the screaming fans, Elvis spent countless hours training in karate. It was more than a hobby for him. It was something he took seriously. Muhammad Ali, on the other hand, was a completely different kind of legend. Ali wasn't just a boxer, he was a force of personality. He spoke boldly, moved quickly, and carried himself like a king long before anyone gave him the title. By 1970, the world already knew Ali as one of the most charismatic and controversial athletes alive. His words were as powerful as his punches, and wherever he went, attention followed. The meeting between these two icons happened backstage after one of Elvis's performances in Las Vegas. The energy in the room that night was electric. Elvis had just stepped off the stage after another explosive performance. Fans were still cheering somewhere in the distance, and the excitement of the show hadn't yet faded. Inside the private room backstage, a few close friends and members of Elvis's inner circle were present. Suddenly, someone quietly announced that Muhammad Ali had arrived. The room immediately grew quiet. Even in a place filled with celebrities and famous faces, Ali's presence carried a unique kind of gravity. When Ali walked into the room, he didn't enter quietly. He rarely did anything quietly. With his tall frame, confident smile, and unmistakable charisma, he seemed to fill the room instantly. Everyone turned their attention toward him. Elvis stood up almost immediately. For a moment, the two men simply looked at each other. It was one of those rare moments where words weren't necessary yet. They both understood exactly who the other was. Elvis, the king of rock and roll, Ali, the self-proclaimed greatest. Then Elvis stepped forward and extended his hand. Ali took it with a grin. The handshake between them lasted only a second, but the moment carried the weight of two global legends meeting for the first time. People in the room later said it felt like history unfolding right in front of them. Elvis broke the silence first. He told Ali that he had always admired him. Elvis had watched many of Ali's fights and loved the way he moved in the ring. To Elvis, Ali wasn't just a fighter, he was a performer in his own way. The way Ali talked before fights, the way he danced around opponents, the way he controlled the crowd, it reminded Elvis of the power of stage presence. Ali listened carefully, smiling slightly as Elvis spoke. Compliments were nothing new to him, but this one was different. This praise was coming from the most famous entertainer in America. Ali then glanced at Elvis from head to toe, noticing the belt and the confident posture Elvis carried even off stage. "What I hear," Ali said with a playful tone, "is that you're a fighter too." The room suddenly filled with quiet laughter. Elvis smiled. He knew exactly what Ali was referring to: karate. Elvis explained that he had been training for years and had even earned a black belt. For Elvis, martial arts weren't just about fighting. They were about discipline, control, and focus. Ali raised an eyebrow slightly. "You mean to tell me the king of rock and roll can fight?" he joked. Everyone laughed again. But behind the humor, there was curiosity. Ali was genuinely interested. He had met many celebrities before, but few had the dedication to train seriously in any form of combat. Elvis then showed Ali something that immediately caught the boxer's attention. It was a specially designed karate robe Elvis had prepared. The robe was elegant, white, and carefully embroidered. Elvis had brought it out as a gift for Ali. When Ali saw it, he paused for a moment, surprised by the gesture. Elvis handed it to him with a respectful nod. "This is for you," Elvis said. Ali slowly unfolded the robe and looked at the words embroidered on it. His smile widened. People in the room leaned forward slightly, sensing that something memorable was about to happen. Ali looked back up at Elvis. For a brief second, the playful atmosphere faded. The room grew quieter again. Then Elvis said something that would surprise everyone in the room that night. and the words he spoke to Elvis would become one of the most talked about moments between two legends. But no one in that room expected what Muhammad Ali was about to say next. The room was still quiet after the moment Muhammad Ali unfolded the karate robe that Elvis Presley had given him. The white fabric reflected the warm backstage lights, and the embroidered words shimmered slightly as Ali held it up in front of him. For a man who was rarely speechless, Ali paused longer than anyone expected. Elvis watched him carefully. He wasn't trying to impress the champion with money or fame. The gift meant something deeper. Elvis respected fighters. He admired discipline. And in his mind, Muhammad Ali represented the very best of that world. Elvis had spent years studying martial arts. When most people imagined Elvis Presley, they pictured the stage, the guitar, the famous voice, and the screaming crowds. But away from the spotlight, Elvis practiced karate with serious dedication. It wasn't just exercise.
It was a philosophy he believed in. He loved the control, the focus, and the mental strength that martial arts required. Elvis had started training years earlier while filming movies and touring, and over time, he had reached the level of a black belt. His instructors often said that Elvis trained harder than many professional students. So when Elvis watched Ali fight, he didn't see just entertainment. He saw skill, he saw rhythm, he saw timing. To Elvis, Muhammad Ali moved like a dancer inside the boxing ring. Ali would glide across the canvas, slipping punches by inches, floating just out of reach of his opponent's fists. Elvis had studied those movements the way a musician studies another artist's performance. Elvis broke the silence first. "I've watched a lot of your fights," he said calmly. Ali lowered the robe slightly and looked at him with curiosity. Elvis continued, explaining how fascinated he was by Ali's speed and footwork. He told Ali that the famous phrase, "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee," wasn't just clever poetry, it was actually true when you watched him move. A few people in the room chuckled quietly, but Ali didn't laugh. Instead, he studied Elvis more closely. Ali had met countless celebrities, politicians, actors, and musicians. Many of them complimented him, but their praise often sounded polite rather than genuine. Elvis sounded different. He spoke like someone who understood combat training. "You really watch boxing like that?" Ali asked. Elvis nodded. "I study it," he said. "Same way I study karate." Ali tilted his head slightly. Now the conversation had his full attention. Elvis explained that karate had changed his life in many ways. Touring the world, dealing with fame, and living under constant pressure wasn't always easy. Martial arts helped him stay balanced. It taught him patience and discipline. It also gave him confidence away from the stage. Ali listened carefully.
For once, the famous talkative champion let someone else speak. Elvis then told Ali that he believed fighters and performers had something in common. Both had to face a crowd. Both had to control nerves. Both had to perform under intense pressure, where one mistake could change everything. Ali smiled at that idea. "You saying a concert is like a fight?" he asked playfully. Elvis laughed softly. "In some ways," he replied, "except nobody's trying to knock me out." The room burst into laughter. Even Ali laughed at that. But Elvis quickly added something more serious. He said that stepping onto a stage in front of thousands of people could feel just as intense as stepping into a ring. Every eye was watching. Every movement mattered. And once the moment started, there was no turning back. Ali nodded slowly. He understood exactly what Elvis meant. The ring was his stage. Under the bright lights, surrounded by roaring fans, Ali performed just like an entertainer. His speeches before fights, his jokes, his confidence, they were all part of the show. But behind that show was a dangerous sport, where every punch could change a career. Ali looked again at the karate robe in his hands. "You really train hard?" he asked Elvis. Elvis nodded again. "Every chance I get." Ali suddenly stepped back slightly and raised his fists in a playful boxing stance. "Well then," he said with a grin, "maybe we should see what the king of rock and roll can do." The room immediately erupted with excitement. Some people laughed, others leaned forward eagerly, wondering if the two legends might actually spar for fun. Elvis raised his hands too, but instead of a boxing stance, he moved into a classic karate guard position. His posture was balanced, calm, and surprisingly precise. Ali noticed it instantly. His smile widened. "Okay," Ali said, pointing at Elvis. "I see you know something." Elvis relaxed his stance and laughed again, lowering his hands.
"I'm not trying to fight the heavyweight champion of the world," he said. Ali shook his head with amusement. "Smart man," he replied. The room settled down again, but the atmosphere had changed. What started as a polite celebrity meeting was turning into a genuine connection between two men who respected each other's craft. Ali placed the robe over his shoulder and looked directly at Elvis again. For a moment, the playful mood faded slightly. Ali's expression became thoughtful, almost serious. He looked around the room, then back at Elvis. And that's when Muhammad Ali said something that surprised everyone present, something that Elvis himself would remember long after that night ended. Ali pointed gently toward Elvis and spoke a sentence that no one expected to hear from the loudest, most confident champion in the world. What he said next made the entire room go silent again, and it changed the way people in that room saw both legends forever. For a moment, the room was completely silent after Muhammad Ali studied Elvis Presley with that thoughtful look in his eyes. Only a few minutes earlier, the atmosphere had been full of laughter and friendly jokes, but now something about Ali's expression had changed. The people standing around them could feel it immediately. Whenever Muhammad Ali became quiet, it usually meant he was about to say something important. Ali slowly placed the karate robe over his shoulder again and looked straight at Elvis. His eyes carried that famous spark of confidence that the world had seen inside the boxing ring so many times. Then he spoke in a calm but playful voice. "You know," Ali said, "they call you the king." A few people in the room smiled. Of course they did. Everyone knew the nickname. Elvis Presley had been called the King of Rock and Roll for years. It was a title that followed him everywhere he went. Ali continued speaking before anyone else could say anything.
But in my world, he said, tapping his chest lightly, I'm the greatest. The room filled with quiet laughter again. Ali had said those words many times before fights. It was one of his most famous phrases. But hearing him say it directly in front of Elvis Presley made the moment feel special. Elvis didn't seem offended at all. Instead, he smiled calmly, clearly enjoying the confidence Ali carried. "I wouldn't argue with that," Elvis replied. Ali nodded approvingly. "Good," he said with a grin. Then he took a step closer. The playful spark returned to his eyes. "But I still want to know something," Ali continued. Elvis raised an eyebrow slightly. "What's that?" he asked. Ali lifted his hands again in a loose boxing stance. "If the king knows karate," he said, "maybe the king can fight a little too." The room suddenly burst into louder laughter. A few people clapped. Someone in the corner jokingly shouted, "Let's see it." Elvis laughed as well, shaking his head slightly. He knew Ali was half joking and half serious. Ali loved to challenge people, even in friendly situations. It was part of his personality. Elvis lifted his hands again in that same karate guard stance he had shown earlier. His movements were controlled and smooth. Ali immediately noticed the balance in Elvis's posture. This wasn't just a celebrity pretending to know martial arts. Elvis clearly understood the basics. Ali circled him slowly, still smiling. "All right," Ali said, "show me something." Elvis chuckled and relaxed his shoulders. "I think you'd win that one," he replied. Ali shook his head. "Hey, don't be scared now," he teased. The people in the room laughed again, enjoying the moment. But Elvis didn't move away. Instead, he adjusted his stance slightly and demonstrated a quick karate motion in the air. It was fast, very fast. His arms snapped forward and stopped sharply before extending fully, showing perfect control. Ali's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Okay," he said loudly. "Now that's not bad." The room reacted with cheers and laughter. Ali stepped closer and looked at Elvis more carefully now, as if studying him the same way he studied opponents before a fight. "You really train," Ali said, this time sounding more impressed than playful. Elvis nodded calmly. "Every chance I get," he replied. Ali placed his hands on his hips and shook his head with a grin. "Man, the king of rock and roll doing karate," he said. "That's something I didn't expect to see tonight." Elvis smiled. "And I didn't expect the heavyweight champion of the world to show up at my show," he answered. Ali laughed loudly at that. The room relaxed again as the tension faded, but Ali still seemed curious. He looked at Elvis thoughtfully for another moment, then suddenly stepped back and spoke again. "All right," Ali said, pointing a finger at Elvis with a playful challenge. "Let's imagine something." Everyone leaned in slightly, wondering what he meant. "Let's imagine," Ali continued, "the two of us in a real fight." The room immediately filled with excited reactions. People started laughing and whispering. Some imagined a boxing ring, while others pictured a karate match. Elvis raised his hand slightly as if surrendering. "I think I'd rather stick to singing," he joked. Ali shook his head dramatically. No, he said. "You can't run from the challenge now." Elvis smiled wider, but didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked around the room at the friends and assistants watching them. Everyone seemed entertained by the friendly rivalry between the two legends. Finally, Elvis spoke again. "All right," he said calmly, "but if we fought, it wouldn't be boxing." Ali folded his arms. "Oh, really?" Elvis nodded. "It would have to be karate." The room went quiet for a second. Ali stared at Elvis as if processing the idea. Then his eyes widened dramatically. "Karate?" he repeated. Elvis nodded again, keeping a straight face. Ali suddenly burst into laughter, so loud that everyone else joined in. He leaned slightly forward, shaking his head. "Man," he said, "you trying to change the rules on the champion?" Elvis laughed with him, clearly enjoying the moment. But Ali slowly straightened up again and looked at Elvis with that familiar competitive fire returning to his eyes. "All right," Ali said slowly, pointing again. "Maybe we won't fight tonight." He paused, letting the suspense build. Then he added something that made the entire room fall silent again. "But I'll tell you one thing," Ali said. "There's something about you I didn't expect." Elvis watched him carefully, and the words Muhammad Ali said next would become one of the most surprising compliments the king of rock and roll had ever heard. The room had grown quiet again after the playful challenge between Muhammad Ali and Elvis Presley. Only moments earlier, everyone had been laughing, imagining what it would look like if the king of rock and roll and the heavyweight champion of the world actually faced each other in a fight. But now the atmosphere had shifted again. Ali stood still for a moment, studying Elvis with a thoughtful expression. He wasn't just looking at a famous singer anymore. He was looking at a man who clearly respected discipline and training. The karate stance Elvis had shown earlier had surprised him. Many celebrities talked about martial arts, but very few actually practiced it seriously. Elvis had demonstrated something real. Ali slowly removed the karate robe from his shoulder again and looked at it more carefully. The robe was beautifully made, bright white with carefully embroidered lettering across the back. The stitching was precise and elegant, clearly prepared with respect and attention. The words on the robe caught Ali's attention once more. Elvis had chosen them carefully. They honored Ali's identity not just as a fighter, but as a symbol. Ali ran his fingers across the embroidered letters, almost as if he was feeling the meaning behind them. People in the room watched quietly. Elvis didn't rush the moment. He stood calmly, letting Ali take in the gift in his own time. For Elvis, this was more than a simple present. Giving that robe to Ali was a gesture of admiration. Elvis respected fighters who carried themselves with courage and confidence, and in his eyes, Muhammad Ali represented the ultimate champion. Ali finally looked back up at Elvis. His usual playful grin had softened slightly. "You really had this made for me?" he asked. Elvis nodded. "I wanted you to have something from me," he said simply. Ali looked at the robe again and shook his head slowly in appreciation. "Man," he said quietly, "this is something special." A few people in the room nodded in agreement. Even among celebrities and performers, it was rare to see such a genuine exchange of respect. Ali draped the robe across his arm and took a few steps closer to Elvis. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "a lot of people think fame makes men proud." Elvis listened carefully. Ali continued speaking, his voice calmer now. "But sometimes fame just shows who a man really is." The people standing around them sensed that something meaningful was about to be said. Ali looked Elvis directly in the eyes. "I came here tonight expecting to meet a superstar," he said. "But instead, I met a man who respects the fight." Elvis didn't say anything immediately. The words seemed to genuinely touch him. Ali lifted the robe slightly again. "You didn't have to do this," he said. Elvis shrugged lightly. "I wanted to." Ali smiled slowly, clearly appreciating the sincerity. For someone known around the world for bold speeches and loud confidence, Muhammad Ali suddenly seemed very thoughtful in that moment. Then Ali did something unexpected. He unfolded the robe completely and held it up behind his shoulders, almost as if imagining himself wearing it. The crowd in the room chuckled as he posed for a second like a champion stepping into the ring. "How do I look?"
he asked jokingly. The room burst into laughter again. Elvis laughed too. Like the champion you are, he replied. Ali nodded proudly. That's right, he said. The greatest. The familiar phrase made everyone smile again. But Ali quickly lowered the robe and looked back at Elvis more seriously. But let me tell you something, Ali continued. Being the greatest fighter isn't just about punches. Elvis listened closely. Ali tapped the robe again. Respect matters, he said. And tonight you showed it. The room became quiet once more. These were not the usual playful words people expected from Muhammad Ali. He looked around at the small group of people watching them. A lot of famous people talk big, Ali said, but not many show real respect to another man's craft. Then he turned back to Elvis. You did. Elvis nodded slightly, clearly humbled by the compliment. He had always admired Ali's strength and confidence, but hearing those words from the champion meant something special. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. It was one of those rare moments when two legends simply shared mutual respect without needing to prove anything. Finally, Ali broke the silence again. He pointed lightly toward Elvis. But I'll tell you something else, he said. The room leaned in again, sensing another memorable line coming. Ali smiled slowly, that familiar spark returning to his eyes. You might be the king of rock and roll, he said. Elvis raised an eyebrow, curious where the sentence was going. Ali paused just long enough to build suspense. Then he finished the thought in a way that surprised everyone listening. And the compliment Muhammad Ali gave Elvis in that moment was something very few people ever expected to hear from the self-proclaimed greatest. The room waited in complete silence as Muhammad Ali looked directly at Elvis Presley.
Everyone standing nearby sensed that something memorable was about to be said. Ali had already shown respect for Elvis's dedication to martial arts and for the special karate robe that had been given to him, but now his expression carried a deeper seriousness. This wasn't just friendly joking anymore. Ali slowly folded the robe over his arm and took a step closer to Elvis. His eyes held that same sharp focus people had seen many times inside the boxing ring, the look he carried when he was about to deliver a powerful statement. You might be the king of rock and roll, Ali said slowly. Elvis smiled politely, waiting for the rest of the sentence. Ali raised his finger slightly, as if emphasizing the point. But I'll tell you something, he continued. The room leaned in closer. Some of Elvis's friends exchanged curious looks. They knew Ali was famous for bold comments, but no one knew exactly where he was going with this. Ali nodded toward Elvis with a small grin. You're also a fighter, in your own way. The sentence surprised several people in the room. Elvis himself seemed slightly caught off guard. Ali wasn't talking about boxing or karate now. He was talking about something deeper. Ali continued speaking, his voice calm but confident. A lot of people think being a fighter means standing in a ring and throwing punches, he said. But that's not the only kind of fight there is. Elvis listened quietly, clearly interested. Ali pointed toward the stage area outside the room where Elvis had performed earlier that night. The distant noise of fans could still be heard echoing faintly through the hallways. You go out there every night, Ali said, in front of thousands of people. He paused for a moment. That takes courage, too. The room fell silent again. Many of the people present had never thought about it that way before. To them, Elvis Presley was simply a superstar performer. But Ali was describing the pressure of performing in front of massive crowds as its own kind of battle. Elvis nodded slowly, understanding the comparison. Ali continued, warming up to his point. When I step into a ring, he said, the whole world is watching me. He tapped his chest again. But when you step on that stage, the whole world is watching you too. Elvis smiled slightly. The words clearly meant something to him. Ali leaned back a little and crossed his arms, still studying Elvis. Different arenas, he said. Same pressure. Someone in the room quietly murmured agreement. It was a simple idea, but coming from Muhammad Ali, it carried weight. Elvis finally spoke again. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. Ali laughed softly. That's because you're used to it. He gestured toward the door that led to the stage area. Those people out there scream for you the way fans scream at a championship fight. Elvis chuckled. Hopefully they're a little less violent. Ali laughed loudly at that, and the room joined in again. But Ali quickly returned to his point. You fight in your way, he said. I fight in mine. Elvis nodded with respect. Ali looked down again at the robe Elvis had given him. The gesture clearly still impressed him. And tonight, Ali said, you showed me something. Elvis raised an eyebrow slightly. What's that? Ali looked up again and smiled. That the king has discipline. The room reacted with approving laughter and nods. For Ali, discipline was one of the most important qualities any fighter could have. Hearing him acknowledge that quality in Elvis was a genuine compliment. Ali stepped forward again and gently placed a hand on Elvis's shoulder. "You know something else?" he added. Elvis waited. Ali's voice softened slightly as he delivered the final thought. "Fame can make a man forget who he is." He paused. "But tonight, you reminded me that some men stay humble, no matter how big they become." Elvis looked genuinely moved by the comment. The room became quiet again. Those words coming from Muhammad Ali carried enormous meaning. Ali then stepped back, smiling again as the serious moment slowly faded. "But don't get me wrong," he said playfully. "If we ever did fight." Elvis laughed before Ali could finish the sentence. "You'd win," he said. Ali pointed at him instantly. "Now you're talking smart again." The room erupted in laughter. But the conversation had already created a moment none of the people present would ever forget. Two of the most famous men in the world had just shared a rare exchange of respect and honesty. And although the night was far from over, everyone in that room could feel that the meeting between Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali had already become something special. Yet before the evening ended, one more moment would happen, something that would turn this meeting into a story people would remember for decades. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed since the moment Muhammad Ali first walked in. What began as a simple backstage meeting had slowly turned into something much more meaningful. Everyone standing around could feel it. Two men who dominated completely different worlds had just discovered something they shared: respect, discipline, and the pressure of living in front of the entire world. Elvis Presley stood calmly while Ali still held the karate robe draped over his arm. The laughter from a few seconds earlier was fading, but the warm energy in the room remained. Ali looked around the room at the small crowd of friends, assistants, and security members who had witnessed the conversation. Many of them knew they had just watched something rare. Meetings between celebrities happened all the time in Las Vegas, but this one felt different. These weren't just celebrities. These were two cultural icons whose influence reached millions of people. Ali looked back at Elvis and shook his head with a smile.
"You know something?" he said. "People always want to compare champions." Elvis raised an eyebrow slightly. Ali continued, speaking in that confident rhythm people knew so well. "They want to know who's the best, who's stronger, who's greater." He paused and pointed lightly toward Elvis. "But sometimes greatness doesn't compete." The room grew quiet again as he finished the thought. Elvis nodded slowly. He understood what Ali meant. They weren't rivals. They were masters of two different stages. Elvis then said something that made Ali grin again. "You're still the greatest in that ring," Elvis said. Ali immediately straightened up proudly. "That's right," he replied. "The greatest." The familiar phrase made everyone laugh again, but Elvis added something else right after. "And you always will be." Ali's grin softened into a look of appreciation. Even someone as confident as Muhammad Ali knew the value of sincere respect from another legend. Ali then carefully folded the karate robe Elvis had given him and placed it over his shoulder again. "I'm keeping this," he said firmly. Elvis nodded. "It's yours." Ali taxed the robe once with his hand. "And every time I see it," he added, "I'll remember the night the king gave the champion a gift." The room chuckled again, but the moment felt genuine. Elvis then extended his hand once more. Ali looked at it for a second and shook it firmly. Their handshake this time lasted longer than the first one. Cameras weren't flashing, reporters weren't crowding around them, yet the moment felt historic. Two of the most famous men of the 20th century were standing face to face, sharing a simple gesture of respect. One of Elvis's friends quietly whispered, "That's a picture people would love to see." Ali overheard it and laughed. "Yeah," he said, "the king and the greatest." Elvis smiled at the phrase. For a moment, they stood there talking casually again, discussing training, performances, and the strange life of global fame. But eventually, Ali glanced toward the door. He knew he couldn't stay all night. Before leaving, he turned back toward Elvis one last time. "Keep training," Ali said with a playful tone. Elvis laughed. "Only if you keep winning." Ali pointed toward him. "That part is guaranteed." The room burst into laughter once again. Then Ali headed toward the door, still carrying the karate robe over his shoulder, like a champion leaving the ring with a prize.
Just before stepping out, he looked back and delivered one final line that perfectly captured the night. "The world might call you the king," he said, "but tonight I met a man who earned that crown." Elvis nodded quietly, clearly touched by the compliment. With that, Muhammad Ali stepped out of the room and disappeared down the hallway. The people who had witnessed the meeting slowly began talking again, realizing they had just seen something unforgettable. Over the years, stories about that night would spread among fans of both legends. People loved the idea that the king of rock and roll and the greatest boxer of all time had shared a moment of humor, admiration, and respect. And even though their worlds were different, one filled with music and roaring crowds, the other with boxing rings and championship fights, the meeting proved something simple. True legends recognize greatness in each other. And on that unforgettable night, Muhammad Ali and Elvis Presley did exactly that.